Oops, I'm not connected. Oh.
That kind of becomes part of the I had for 5 years, and it's just like I knew all this. I knew what this
Okay.
something like everyone goes around saying that like every things is like very dependent on like I don't know. You think that they don't care because you call them, maybe they don't come. But like sometimes they'll just be like studying, I don't know, like studying for midterm or something, and then you just come and see society. Like they're just yeah. Do you think you'll ever get anything like that? Oh, okay. How many people do you like? Like dirty or like yeah, me too. It's so easy to take care of
Okay. Da, 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 da. Do 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 do. La la la. Okay. Hello, hello, hello. Alrighty. So, how's it going? Hopefully good. I am just double checking one thing. I didn't upload those ones? Oh. I thought everything was, maybe I didn't unlock those yet. I am having trouble with the internet at the moment. Okay. Maybe it's just the YouTube. I am super smart at all times. Okay. This is sociology of youth, right? I'm in the right place? Okay. Oh, I didn't. I remember what happened. Okay. I thought everything was there, and I'm wrong again. Okay. Now you unfortunately have to see the chaos that is my OneDrive. Okay, courses. There are too many of them. Master. There we go. Sorry about that. I thought I had uploaded everything for the whole term, which is usually what I do, but apparently I'm too clever by half. Right. I can't upload the PowerPoint if it's open. See what you've done? Choked puppety. Okay, now you've just lost everything. That's perfect. It's wonderful. Create file. Okay, stop that. Add items. Oh, come on. There we go. Okay. Okay, you should see them there now, along with 2 versions of the PDF for some reason. I don't know why. And now let me see if I can bring back the slides. I'll see what I can do. Okay. Great. Balls of fire. Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks for pointing out that I needed to make that detour. All right. My trusty pen in hand. Okay, so as I said on Friday, I decided to redo the whole families unit. And when I was looking at it again today, I was like, oh, thank God, this thing needs a major facelift. So, much like myself. I'm sorry. I'm kidding. I need hair implants. That's what I need. Okay, so we're going to talk education. And then after the midterm, we're going to go back to families. Once I've had time to sort of sit down and put the slides together, because it's needing, I think, a little bit of a facelift. Education is fine, so we're going to talk a little bit about education. Okay, so midterm is, I believe, next Monday, if I'm not mistaken, February 3rd, right? So my goal is to get through education today, Wednesday, and then on Friday, look at some practice questions with you and Q&A. So that will mean that our exam will be on kind of the, historical perspectives, right? So the postman stuff and the other stuff that's in there, the cultural world of generations, and education. And we'll pick up from there. We'll try to make up some time as we go through the course to get back on track. Although I should just stop doing a schedule altogether and just tell you, aside from the exam dates, randomly as we go through what we're going to be studying, because I can never keep on track ever in my history. All right, so a new Slido, so our at-home listeners can participate as well. Okay, so when we talk about education, why, with regards to youth, why are we talking about it? Well, obviously, it has a bunch of really important kind of connections. So basically, from the age of 5 to 18, you're in either primary or secondary, right? So basically, it is your job for 13 years of your life, and then usually from 18 to about 22, we're in some kind of post-secondary education. Not everybody goes, but increasingly, it's becoming a demand of our post-industrial economy. So this is going to be where young people are essentially for the bulk of their lives. Like even if we start from 12 to 29, right, and that's what we're talking about as youth, you're in there for a really, really long period of your life when you're considered like a young person. Okay, so no, don't get ahead of yourself again. Stop it. Don't say all the thoughts on the first slide. Slow down. Okay, I have so many thoughts. Okay, so school, our primary occupation, particularly until you finish secondary. Graduating from high school is still treated, it depends where you are, but in most places, as one of life's big transition moments. And I increasingly find this kind of funny because, I don't know, when you hear people being like, I'm graduating from high school and we're having a big party, it's like, great. Is it to celebrate even more school after? Because, increasingly, this is no longer the transition into adulthood. And so, your grad or prom or whatever used to be kind of this transition into adulthood, because when you got your high school diploma, for the most part, most people were then using that high school diploma to pivot straight into work, right? And typically, like if we talk about really the period from like 1900 until probably about 1980, 1985, the high school diploma, or maybe even later, you can probably put it as late as maybe 1989. The high school diploma was your key kind of transition into good work, right? If you had your high school diploma, you could get a good, well-paying job and aspire into the middle class. Now, obviously, as we have kind of transitioned into kind of a post-industrial economy away from manufacturing, this is no longer the case, which is why, I joke, you get to graduate from high school into even more school, but we still treat it like it's this big moment of transition. It used to be, because most people were done with school after high school. Yeah, please.
People who did undergrads were like comfortably upper middle class or like upper class.
Oh, easily, yeah. And I mean, you would have been talking a much smaller percentage of the population, maybe 10 to 15%, who are pursuing university education, right? As opposed to now, I mean, all post-secondary put together, you're probably, if you take 4-year and 2-year kind of degrees, you're probably looking at about half, right? Because go try to find a job with a high school diploma. It's retail, it's hospitality, even childcare increasingly requires some kind of certificates, right? So you're I think the proper economics term is completely screwed if you try to make a life with just a high school diploma. Okay, all right, and of course, if we're talking about this is a little backwards, because usually when I talk about families, our families are our site of primary socialization, but our schools are probably the major site of secondary socialization. Okay. So in terms of kind of our track record of secondary schooling, like I said, it used to be really the key to getting a good job. As it's become, as we've sort of transitioned, even the standards for schools have become higher and higher, and there's increasing kind of global competition to have the best school systems and be churning out the best graduates that are the most capable. Now, if we go back to the 1990s, Canada and the US both lagged way behind kind of Western European countries in things like math and science, right? Particularly, reading scores were not all that special either. So this is measured on this test. This is PISA, or the Program of International Student Assessment, which is basically this international competition. They choose students from each country to do these exams to kind of get a sense of where these different school systems hit. Okay, so in the 1990s, Canada was way behind. By 2010, Canadian students had risen up the rankings, scored second in reading, fifth in science, and sixth in math. So Canada had jumped up the rankings, and it's kind of bounced around in the top 10 ever since. At times it's been a little bit higher in some of these subjects, although in the last probably 15 years, Canada has been sort of seeing its performance on these tests steadily declining, especially in math. Math has been an area where Canadian students increasingly struggle. This has been blamed largely on a program in math which became very trendy in the 2000s and 2010s called Discovery Math. You probably all lived through it. where it was like you got to pick how you wanted to solve math problems rather than being told the proper way. And it's now kind of being reversed. Okay. The big change, though, actually, where Canada really jumped forward was actually in Alberta, and following Alberta's example later, Ontario. Because Alberta redid its curriculum in the 1990s so that it would be a lot more rigorous. And that's where you get, some of the changes in the curriculum. It used to be prior to the 1990s that everybody just did Math 30, and then they split, Math 30 and Science 30, and then they split them. I can't remember what they are now. When I was doing it was like Applied, the one which was like more straightforward, and Pure, which was like, leading into calculus. I think it's like 30-1 and -2, right? Which one's the one for the dumb kids? No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry. It was applied math when I was there. Oh, I'm such a terrible person. And it's Monday. And what a terrible Monday it is. No. Right. So they revamped the curriculum, changed it, really focused on math teaching and different ways of teaching math and science. And Alberta sort of dragged Canada into the upper echelons internationally. And Canada's scores are still pretty good, right? In 2022, it had slipped a bit. Canada was down to 8th overall, 9th in math, 8th in reading, and 8th in science. So still in the top 10 kind of internationally. And again, Alberta always leads the way in all of these scores. The US always scores really bad. Now, I will say that I'm going to say a couple of things about the US. Because the US is a big country. And, how to put this politely. There is no way. So, hang on, I'm going to erase my squiggles so I can tell you this. If you split the US up by jurisdiction, Massachusetts would be like number 2 in the world in terms of all of these scores, basically. Super high. New York would be pretty high as well. I can't remember what rank. What kind of tends to drag the US's score down is places like this: Alabama, MISSI, SSI, PPI. I know how to spell Mississippi. All of which essentially rank somewhere around 30 to 40 in the rankings. And there's a lot of other kind of states in the US that don't do particularly well. So the US is a weird place. Really rich places in the US, like Massachusetts and New York, do really well. California used to do amazing, but their school system has gone to absolute bad word. And for lots of reasons, mismanagement being central to it. But if you took like different parts of the US, you have very different results based on all sorts of different things. I mean, for one, this is in this book. It's actually kind of an interesting book. Compares like some of the best and worst in the world. And in Alabama, who do you think the highest paid person in a school tends to be in Alabama? Any guesses? What's that? Nope. In some schools in Alabama and Mississippi, the high school football coach frequently makes better than $1 million per year. So, high school football is huge in the southern states. Now, this isn't necessarily typical. That's going to be your top football high schools. But you also frequently have more focus on sports than academics. I guess I'll say sports is greater than academics. So this really skews, I don't know what word that is. I'm trying to write academics. This screws up the American system in all sorts of ways, right? The focus, especially on high school football in the southern states, often means that you have deeply unqualified football coaches also then being hired as teachers, and they end up teaching like science or math, and you can imagine about how well that goes. Okay, so hang on. Do I have everything here? Yes, I've told you all the fun stuff. It's a really interesting book. It's a few years old now, but well worth a read. Okay, so sorry, I said that really loud and I feel like I'm barking at you. I'm sorry. All right, dropping out. Dropping out has been a major concern for a long time, especially, how to put this? If you don't have a high school diploma, right? Without a high school diploma in Canada, you can expect that your average annual wage will be somewhere between $15,000 and $33,000 a year, which puts you, pretty comfortably in poverty. So keeping people in high school tends to be a major goal of a lot of policy with regards to schools. Now, dropout rates are highly variable. The biggest thing that seems to affect high school dropout rates, there's a bunch of things like socioeconomic status is probably the biggest one. Sex, not having it, but which one you are, right? Males do tend to drop out in general more than females. Parental education, parental education plays a big role as well. And there's family structure. Children of single parents tend to have much higher dropout rates than non-single parent families children who live with partnered mothers, I think is the term that economics is using. So big concern in general with dropping out. Okay, what tends to lead to dropouts is incredibly variable race. Sorry, race is the other one. Race and ethnicity are big ones as well. So in the US, obviously, you tend to see the highest dropout rates amongst Blacks and Latinos. Latinos. In Canada, it's amongst Indigenous and Black as well. Dropout rates for Indigenous people is somewhere around twice the national average. And depending on the immigrant groups, you tend to have pretty low dropout rates, especially East and Southeast Asian immigrants have incredibly low dropout rates, hovering somewhere around, 2 to 4% on average, depending on the group. So really low dropout rates in general. Okay, so what affects this? There's lots of things that do, but we'll talk about this one first, because this is sort of macroeconomics. Higher minimum wage for entry-level wages, right? So, and here the distinction is the minimum wage is not always the same as the average wage for entry-level jobs. So the higher both of these are, the more dropouts you get. So for example, in Alberta in about 2013, driven by oil and gas, we had a catastrophically high dropout rate of around 25%, driven almost entirely by males going to work in oil and gas. Now, why is this? Well, essentially because, in 2013, basically people who were 17, 18 could get a job working out on oil rigs that was paying, 6 figures, over 100K, basically for being alive, right? For having a physical body that worked. Now, this is not exactly a great, how shall we say, economic plan, because when we hit 2015 and oil and gas crashed, a lot of those jobs went away, and a lot of those people ended up no longer having $100,000 a year jobs. The other thing that happened with this particular story is that because the price of oil really went down in Alberta, a bunch of the Alberta oil companies started to think about how they could automate these rigs, and the average number of people so in 2013, the average number of people that it took to operate an oil rig was about 30. Do you have a guess as how many people it takes to operate the average oil rig today? 10? That's a good guess. It's actually 3, right? So, because they've automated so much of the process, it only takes about 3 people to operate the average rig. And when some of these rigs ended up moving down to North Dakota during the shale boom, I remember some of the North Dakotan oil workers being like, these things are like transformers because the Canadian rigs were so high tech, but they've become standard in the industry now. Okay, that's a fun thing. Okay, so dropout rates when the average wage, entry-level wage, right, and this was much higher than the minimum wage, will tend to go up because, quite simply, people are making an economic calculation, right, a sort of rational economic choice that they can make a lot of money right now versus waiting and getting that high school diploma and forgoing, let's say 2 years at $100,000 a year, which when you're 17, 18, 19, not, $100,000 seems like a lot of money, and it is. Okay, and you're probably all like, $100,000 is a lot of money, and yet it doesn't feel like it. Okay, so lower socioeconomic status is a big one, right? The lower you are down that socioeconomic echelon, right, at or below the poverty line, the more likely you are to drop out. And this is all sorts of things, right? Whether it's just to help support family, help support yourself, your living situation is likely more unstable. People are more likely to drop out in these circumstances. Okay. Yeah, let's go forward. Okay. That said, when they do surveys of people who dropped out, those reasons are highly variable. A lot of it is money, right? A lot of it is I needed the money, I needed to work, I needed to help my mom pay the bills or support my little brother or whatever it happens to be, but they're highly variable. A lot of it also has to do with, how shall we say, problems with school attendance, especially when they're off, maybe working a part-time job and trying to make money, leaves them in conflict with the schools, who then, so problems with attendance and school staff leave them with little choice. There's lots of things to say here, especially when you're talking about lower SES individuals. You have a higher prevalence of people, say, with like antisocial tendencies because of how they were raised, poor parenting, all sorts of things, which will tend to lead them into more conflict with the school system. And this is something that, Pierre Bourdieu talks about. The school system is inherently kind of middle class. The teachers tend to be educated middle class people, and they often clash with sort of working class individuals who often have sort of different values and different ways of moving through the world. Okay, people who are in high or in subcultures tend to have higher dropout rates. Gang subcultures are a big one, obviously, but other ones like, back in the 90s, the goth subculture, anything that's viewed as deviant tends to get more attention from school officials, who often then kind of pressure young people in such a way as they feel like they have little choice but to drop out. Okay. Now, how do the people who drop out feel about it? Well, generally, in the short term, they feel pretty good about it. Because most people who drop out of school probably weren't doing that well. It was probably a difficult experience for them being there and all of those sorts of things. And so in the short term, it's often felt as relief, right? They're able to work more, so they're able to earn a little bit more money, increase their hours, get a second job. But in the long term, right, it obviously is a huge problem, because without that high school diploma, your options are extremely limited economically, right? Increasingly, even with a high school diploma, your economic options are very limited. Without one, your economic options are extraordinarily limited. Okay. Can't see my screen on the live stream. Oh me, oh my. What happened? I've seemed to have lost the PowerPoint altogether. Oh, there it is. Okay, sorry about that. You didn't get to see my fun writing. This is why you should come to class, I guess. Technical difficulties abound. My bad. Okay. Is the midterm open book? Yes, the midterm is open book. But be warned, I test my questions against AIs of many kinds. So if you're thinking, haha, the AI can answer the questions, I will do my best so that the AI will spit out absolute gobbledygook that will get you 3 out of 10 on each question. So huzzah. My war increasingly is not between me and you, but between me and some giant computer farm somewhere. And I will win. I kind of envision this as me versus like the Terminators, except the Terminators write really, really bad essays. And really bad answers to questions. I see this like giant metal exoskeleton, typing on a laptop for you. That's what's in my head. It's rarely that dramatic. Okay. So post-secondary, increasingly very much necessary, right? If you want to be middle class or upper middle class, I mean, if you're already rich and your parents are already rich, I guess you probably don't need to go, but you probably will anyway. But, if you want to aspire to a middle class or upper middle class lifestyle, you're definitely going to need this. And we're seeing increasing demand for post-secondary education, generally speaking, although that might be set to change. And this is just a function of population. Gen Z, you're a small cohort. So we need less university and post-secondary spaces for you than they did in the past. Now, this has been, if it was just you, if it was just like, say Canada was suddenly, unreachable from other countries, but only for university education, not for, bananas and stuff. But okay, my metaphor has clearly broken down. Let's say for some reason people just stopped immigrating to Canada. Generally speaking, our need for post-secondary seats would decline, right? And yours truly would probably be looking for a different job. Or being the best of all the sociology professors, I probably would be the only one they kept here. No, I don't know. I'm kidding. That's probably Richard. I think his rate my professors is 5 out of 5. So, not that I check. I never look, except, all the time. Okay. Now, what's kind of made up for this? I don't know why I'm in such a jokey mood. I'm really sorry. What's made up for this is middle classes in the developing world increasingly sending their children to post-secondary institutions in the West. These are our international students, and long have the universities, probably for about a decade or two, feasted on the high tuition that international students and their families are willing to pay for a Western education. So even as Gen Z, being a small generational cohort, is needing fewer seats, we've boosted it up by bringing in people from other places in the world. So demand for post-secondary education continues to rise for a lot of things. Although we're already starting to see the cracks in this. If you pay attention, there's lots of small liberal arts colleges in the US that are starting to close. So I think that's probably the first cracks in this. Okay, so we're seeing increasing demand, right? And we've obviously got a lot of international students in Canada. That is definitely a thing. Okay. Governments have long been pushing too for a shift to more vocational training. And you see this especially in Alberta, where there's more kind of emphasis in education on getting people into things like trades and careers that have direct outputs into jobs. Now so that would be what we call vocational, right? A vocation is what you're going to do with your life. And so there's more and more push away from, say, a general arts degree or a general science degree into degrees that have direct outputs in the economy, because there's a sense that, a general liberal arts degree, if we go back to our generation slides, right? What is an education for? It used to be like, I want to develop a meaningful philosophy of life. But increasingly, that's been kind of going down. And what's coming up is, economic advantage, right? Stuff, money, and all that stuff. So there's more focus from governments on things like vocational training. And again, vocation could be anything from plumber to like radiologist. By the way, don't become a radiologist. It's both boring and your job is going to get replaced by AI, because I've seen what AI can do with medical scans, and it's better and way faster than the fastest and best radiologist. So anyway, don't become a radiologist. I know right now it pays like $150,000 a year. 10 years from now, like literally someone will take a scan and feed it to like Grok AI on Twitter, and it'll be like, you have cancer, congratulations. It'll be amazing, but terrible at the same time. So don't become a radiologist. That's my honest to God advice. But yeah, these vocational things are becoming more emphasized by governments because governments don't believe in a liberal arts degree. Sorry. The other thing that we have increasingly as the pace of technological change has just picked up and grown is a lot of part-time students upgrading for specific jobs or for specific skills for existing jobs. And more than likely, at some point in your life, you are going to have to do this, right? Take some kind of part-time education to fill in some skills that you don't have that have suddenly appeared in the economy. Like, I don't know, something, AI something. I don't know what we need to know about AI, to be honest, other than how to defeat it. I'm just waiting. John Connor will come. Okay, so the cost of education, I'm sure you're aware of this, increasingly is rising, which means we have an ever-increasing class divide, right? The sort of education haves and the education have-nots. So those with higher income parents, and probably parents that were more likely to have attended college or university, are more likely themselves to be able to attend, right? And the book I'm going to talk about when we talk about families is called The Two-Parent Privilege by Melissa Kearney. It has a whole bunch of information on this. It's really, really interesting. We really are, especially in US society, but it's creeping into other societies as well. We're getting this very stark division between what educated parents are able to provide their kids versus what less educated parents are able to provide. And those divisions are getting bigger and bigger, especially in US society, but we're starting to see it in other places too. And this is a huge problem because that gap is really, really hard to bridge. And there's no, there are economic policies that you can come up with, but it's a really hard one to kind of fix. Okay. So in Canada, the average debt load for a university was about $20,000 coming out versus about $13,000 if you go to like a smaller institution, something like Red Deer Polytechnic or NAIT or something like that, like more of a college model than a university model, okay? In the US, this has been exacerbated by a whole bunch of things. How to put this? I say that a lot, don't I? As I want to say it politely, but sometimes these statistics don't have a polite way of speaking about them. Okay, so they're rising much faster than the rate of inflation. A lot of economists think that this is largely based on a college loans system in the US. So it's non-dischargeable. So what does this mean? In the US, if you take out a college loan, right? Basically, the only way Actually, no, that doesn't even work. I was going to say the only way to get rid of your loan is to die. Dramatic. But even that doesn't work because technically whoever survives you, like if your parents or you're married and your spouse, right? The only way to die is to die and have no one connected to you. That is the only way to get rid of your loan. So they, cough, cough. They are non-dischargeable in bankruptcy, right? Now this was a provision that the US government made to the banks that provide these student loans because if we're looking at risk, again, how to put this politely, you're a really bad investment for a bank because you have nothing, right? You're a young person, you have nothing. You own nothing, you have no collateral. And so if you default on your loan, right, there's nothing the bank can get from you. They just lose that money. So the US government basically said, great, we want more people to go to college, so we want you to give them those loans, but we're going to make them non-dischargeable, which means even if you declare bankruptcy, you can't get rid of that one. That one can't be kind of discharged in bankruptcy. So even if you declare bankruptcy 7 times, you still have to pay back your college loan. Which is why, if you remember the last US administration, they kept trying to give people like student loan relief, basically have the federal government pay off their student loans, which has all sorts of problems as well. But we won't talk about US policy of the Biden administration because he's gone now. So who cares? And everything he's done was undone in one fell swoop by the dark man. Destroyed Colombia on Saturday while he was golfing, apparently. I don't know. They're dark times. Okay, back on track. I'm sorry, I'm being so quippy and weird. Okay, so what do we talk in terms of costs? Community college is a pretty good deal in the US, right? Annual tuitions, somewhere around $4,000 as of 2021. Those have gone up a little bit now, but I couldn't find good numbers, so I stuck with the 2020, 2021. A state college, so like if you were to go to like Ohio State University and you grew up in the state, your parents live in the state, you live in the state, right? About $27,000 a year, which is a substantial chunk of change for 1 year's tuition. A lot of state colleges are of questionable quality too. Now, if you do what a lot of Americans do, because it's a dumb system, but it also has the great feature of working really poorly, you go out of state, right? Instead of going where it economically makes sense, you're like live in Ohio and you decide you're going to go to UCLA or something dumb like that. You'll end up paying, $45,000-ish for state college tuition for a non-resident, which is still, paltry change compared to the $55,000 you would have paid in 2020-21 for a private non-profit college. So if you went to say somewhere like Baylor in Texas, or University of Notre Dame, right? Non-profit colleges, you're paying about that much. And Ivy League school, right? So you have Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Brown, and for some reason Columbia. I don't know why. Columbia sucks. I've been to Columbia. It's like kind of like in New York. The buildings are old and cool, but it's like not that great. So yeah, so this is the other one. Duke obviously is the other one. Duke is here too. But yeah, if you go to an Ivy League school, on average, $64,300, $80. That's 1 year. That's not the whole thing. That's 1 year's tuition. And that doesn't include lodging or books. So you could easily say at Harvard, Yale, be paying in excess of like $100K a year. So a lot of people end up with huge debt loads, right? So a lot of young people start out their working lives with large debt loads, which, some economists have suggested means putting things like marriage and kids on the back burner while you pay your, $500,000 loans you took out to go to university. One of the big things with the Ivies is obviously prestige, right? Why do people pay this ridiculous tuition? Well, because, what's the old joke? How do you tell if someone went to Harvard? You don't have to, they'll tell you, right? It comes with a lot of prestige. Oh my God, I knew this guy. Oh. I swear to God, he could work the fact that he went to Yale into every conversation you had with him. And it was the most, I was like, yes, I know, Steve. I know you went to Yale. I don't care. I guess, yeah, like buy a t-shirt or something. Then it'll be easier to know. Anyway, the Ivies. It's almost as bad as people who went to University of Toronto and for some reason tell you every time you talk to them. I have one friend. It's like, I did my degree at University of Toronto. I'm like, Sean, I know you went to University of Toronto because you bring it up every time we speak. Well, you know, when I was doing my degree, shut up. No one cares. It's not that good a school. It's fine. Anyway, I'm not bitter, but it is kind of annoying. It's like, it's University of Toronto, man. Like, chill. Someone once referred to it as the Harvard of Canada in one of my classes, and I just walked out. I just walked out. I was done. Okay. All right. Oh my God. What time is it? I've just wasted like all this class being funny. I'm sorry. All right. So in Canada, I'm going to do all the slides in the next 3 minutes, by the way. Student debt is dischargeable in Canada after 7 years after the end of the last year you attended schooling. And this is, this has been the case essentially since the Canadian government turned over management to the 5 biggest banks, right? So your Royal, TD, Scotia, CIBC, and the one I always forget, Bank of Montreal. Those are the 5 big banks. They do the bulk of student loans in Canada. They're basically, the loans are managed by them, so they have their nasty collection agencies come after you if you don't pay. At least in Canada, you can discharge it after 7 years, right? So they are guaranteed, again, this is all to protect the banks. They're guaranteed 7 years of debt repayment until you're allowed to discharge it. So Canada is slightly better than the US, where you'll never get rid of that debt. Again, I mean, move to Russia is probably one of the only ways to get rid of your debt in the US, because there's literally no way for them to get to you if you're in Russia at this point. So aside from that, though, nothing else. Okay, this is from Twenge's book. This is from Generations, and just the kind of, the scale here. Started in the 1960s, right? The costs, grants, and loans for U.S. undergraduates, and you can see the cost has gone, wow. Well, the, grants and loans have gone slightly up, ever so gently, but still way below over here, right? There's a fair gap here of what, like $8,000. Okay. I really wish there was, it's noon. That clock time never changes. It's always noon. Okay. I will say this really quickly, then I'll let you go, and we'll finish this next time. Yes. Academic attainment and eventual employment strongly tied to family background. Every additional year of school a parent has means a 5% greater likelihood of their children attending university. I spent way too much time in school. That's how stupid I am. Parents with more education, like the reasoning, right, is parents with more education tend to feel more strongly about school. And one of the things that's true, right, if you did really well in life and you have an undergraduate degree or a master's degree or whatever, you're likely to push your kids to do the same, right? Because you're going to imagine that your success is partially based on that education. So you're going to tell your kids, do more school to an extent, right, to a limit. Or at least get an undergraduate degree, because that's how you're successful in life, because that's how I was successful in life. And parents with more education have more resources to make sure their kids are able to go. Money to pay tuition, tutors, extra help, private schools, whatever it happens to be, right? More resources is more resources, which means that the kid doesn't have to make it on their own. Okay. I'm saying that I didn't do great, but I did get through 15 slides. So I'm going to call that kind of a win for me. I think there's only 26 slides in this deck, so I think we'll be okay finishing this up next time. And we'll go from there. 23. Oh, we'll finish in like the first 10 minutes next class. Why was I rushing? I don't know. Oh, right. I'm still in this room for my next class. Thrilling.